Okay, so if you don't already know Hacker Valley Media, you are about to have your minds blown because Ron and Chris are fantastic. They've been doing this a long, long time, and I am absolutely thrilled that we could pull this off and get them here from Texas, live and in person. And with that, this is known as a tap takeover. These two people are going to teach you something unbelievable. It's a live educational thing, and that is what the ISSA is all about, education. So with that, Ron and Chris, welcome.
All right, how y'all doing tonight? There we go, there we go. Didn't have to do it twice either.
Yeah, everybody pump up, let's do it.
Yes.
I am obsessed with stories. Like movies, books, TV series. I just started Peaky Blinders. I know it's a show that's been out for a long time now, but I am deep in. It seems like I've been watching a lot of different shows with different accents lately. I just went through 1883. I don't know if you all seen that. It's from the Yellowstone.
Great show.
It's fantastic. And then I went from that to finally watching Narcos, which is about the Colombian drug cartel. So different accent there. And then we ended up watching Peaky Blinders, which, again, a different accent. Who here loves stories? Raise your hand. Fantastic. I want to get some crowd participation in right now. What is a story that you absolutely love? Make it a story that could either be a movie, it could be a TV series, it could even be a book. But what's a story that people might know, but is your absolute, either your favorite or one that you love really well?
Shawshank Redemption.
Shawshank Redemption.
Why do you love Shawshank Redemption? Stay on your toes. Anyone else? What's a story you love? To Kill a Mockingbird. Why?
I like Gregory Peck.
You like Gregory Penn?
Peck.
Penn? Why do you like him?
I think the character portrayed
The ultimate Southern gentleman. So very cool.
I like that.
What else? Any other stories?
The Iliad by Homer.
The Iliad by Homer?
Yes.
Why?
Legacy of being in the books.
Legacy being in the books? How did it make you feel when you read the Iliad?
I was a freshman in high school, had no idea what I was reading, but I saw the movie Troy.
Right? Yeah, when you can put it on a Hollywood screen, things are a little easier. But anyone else? Let's do one more. One more story.
Rocky.
Rocky Balboa. All right, so the whole series, like everything from Rocky 1 all the way through Creed, or just Rocky Balboa? 1 and 2. What did you like about the Rocky movies?
I think it's just simplicity, and I was pretty young when I saw it, and I think that's what I took from the show.
Oh, so it actually got you to do something. So what he said was he loves Rocky because he was watching it and he got inspired to do push-ups. So it actually inspired you to take an action. That's what story is really all about. It's about that emotional connection to information, right? If you just have data points up on a screen, it's just data. But when you can tie it to an emotion, it can incite a decision or an action. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. So we're going to talk about mastering the art of storytelling for cybersecurity. So when I say mastering, it's not like everyone's going to come out of here as a master of storytelling. I wouldn't even consider myself a master in storytelling. But what I will say is that mastery is a process. Going through the process every day, just getting a little bit better. As long as you're getting better, you're on the path to mastery. But when you stop or you don't do it at all, that's when you get off that path of mastery. So definitely not a misnomer. But for all of you that don't know who I am, my name is Chris Cochran. I've been in cybersecurity for almost 20 years at this point. But around 2019, I made a huge pivot. Me and my brother here, Ron Eddings, we started doing content. We started with a podcast. We started making more podcasts. We made web series, and we're going to show you a little bit of the stuff that we do. But I became absolutely enthralled with communicating with people through storytelling, through creating content. I spent some time at Netflix, which is around the time that Ron and I started our company, Hacker Valley Media. And right now I'm also the Chief Evangelist and Advisory CISO over at Huntress, focused on small, medium businesses for MDR.
All right, and I'm Ron Eddings, the other half of Hacker Valley Media. I've been in cybersecurity since 2010. It is all I know. All I know is cybersecurity. I've spent some time doing offensive operations, spent some time doing corporate security, and bounced around from startups. But what I've learned that I love the most is really helping people understand cybersecurity. There's a lot of information, especially today. You can go read a blog, read a book, watch a video, but there's usually something that's missing. The storytelling component, something that pulls me in and keeps me there rather than just gives me fact after fact and then scares me to think, all right, I need to take an action. But me and Chris started Hacker Valley Studio. We started speaking to industry leaders and experts. And then I made a decision. The first half of my career, I spent helping organizations with cybersecurity. And the second half of my career, I'm really focused and dedicating myself to telling the stories and giving all of the information back. I kind of look at myself as Yoda, someone that's learned the hard lessons over and over again and trying to empower everyone to feel like Luke Skywalker or Jedi Master and learn from the hard lessons I've learned over time. And we're going to show you what we do next.
Who's ready to make some content? Anybody? Let's do it.
Right, let's get these back up here. So we wanted to kick things off and really talk about what it takes to make a great story. We have a few great quotes up here. The first quote is, a story must strike, it must strike the, actually turn around. It must strike a nerve in me. My heart should stay pounding when I hear the first line in my head. I should start trembling at the risk. This is how I feel a lot of cybersecurity stories could be told. A lot of the cybersecurity stories that we experience and are kind of introduced to really outline risks. They outline danger. In cybersecurity, we are defenders. We must look at information, protect information, and a lot of times when we communicate with our stakeholders, we have to articulate the risk. And when you articulate risk, you can really strike a nerve. There's a lot of nutrient-dense information in cybersecurity that I feel like is untapped, but this is just one of the components of a great story. The second quote that we have is, storytelling is ultimately a creative act of pattern recognition. Through characters, plot, and setting, a writer creates places where previously invisible truths become visible. Or storyteller posits a series of dots that a reader can connect. So a second ago, Chris mentioned a story must invoke emotion. It must strike that nerve. How many have you ever been on a Zoom, a webinar, and you felt like the presenter is just telling you fact after fact after fact, but there's no connective tissue? Right. Lots of hands. And how did that make you feel when you were just being told and told what to do? Like, how did that make you feel in the moment? Checked out. It can make you feel like you've wasted time, or that you've walked away feeling like you didn't really gain anything from dedicating to a conversation or an experience. And we have one more quote that I'll mention up here. A good story, just like a good sentence, does more than one job at once. That's what literature is. A story that does not tell a story that manages to reflect in some way a multi-layered texture of life. When you really connect to the root of a story, of really anything that you're trying to convey, it shouldn't just be singular. A lot of the times when we present or have people on the Hacker Valley Studio podcast, we try to dissect a topic from many different angles. There's a character. The character is the problem. And the problem is the story. The story is all about the character and the problem. We actually just were on a live stream where an organization tried to make a report the character. I'm sure you've all seen a book as like a thumbnail image, and you're trying to say, hey, everything is about this report. Come read this report. But if there's not a human behind it, if there's not a person or some type of character, the story typically falls flat.
So why do we need storytelling in cybersecurity? Let's get some answers. Actually, if we could pass around the mic, just so we could get, so the folks that are dialed in could also hear as well. Why do we need storytelling in cybersecurity? No, we got mic's coming around.
To make the business case and also to make the education and awareness case for the using community.
I love that. Great. That's a great example. Making business cases, explaining, education. What else?
So the same thing, the people who are not in security, they find it very complex and intimidating, the topics of security and compliance.
Well said. Did everybody read these slides before we came out here? Because everybody is nailing it. You're absolutely nailing it. Storytelling humanizes and personalizes often technical and complex information. When we're speaking to the board, when we're speaking to other executives, these folks, they don't necessarily speak our language. Sometimes we have to put the context in their language or make it as simple as possible, that lowest common denominator, to get our point across. Because if you're telling a story and only half of the audience understands it, you just left out the entire opportunity to really speak to everyone. So that's what really storytelling is all about. This is one of my favorite things of all time. Honestly, I didn't find this until, I don't know, maybe a year ago. We do a lot of research into different frameworks for storytelling. They can be very simple, right? One of the most simplest frameworks for storytelling is normal, right? This world exists in this way. Then all of a sudden there's a bang or a disruption. There's something that happens that changes the world forever. And then there's the new normal. That is pretty simplistic. Or you could go more complex. How many of you have heard of the hero's journey, the hero circle, right? That's another framework. It's pretty similar to this one. But the reason I like this one is it's very, very simple, yet it has enough nuance to provide different parts of the story. Who here has watched Rick and Morty? I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say that Rick and Morty is the most intelligent show on television. That's it. The most intelligent show. I'll fight you on it after the presentation. But the story circle is super simple. This is what Dan Harmon, he's the creator of Rick and Morty. This is the story circle that he uses for every episode, for all the other projects that he does. When you look at any story, you can pretty much put just about any story in this story circle. Very similar to who here, if you're a film nut like I am, who here loves Save the Cat? Have you read that book? Save the Cat. It distills all these different genres into 12 very specific stories. And they challenge you. They say, try to find a story that doesn't fit this structure. But this is even simpler because it's one framework. So we start right there with you, the one right there. Establish the protagonist. Now the protagonist in a story could be a person, it could be an animal, it could be a thing, it could be you, it could be your audience. The protagonist has to be a part of that story. And then there is a need. Something isn't right. We think about that all the time in cybersecurity, right? We look at our operations, we look at the things that are important to us, and we feel like, oh, we could be doing more. Or, if we only had this one control in our environment. Oof, if we only had this person that had this skill set in our environment to help us with some of the initiatives that we have. Then you go, right? You have to go across the threshold because the world is as it is. If you don't make that change, no one's going to change it for you. So when you're saying, okay, I'm going to step from here, this world that I'm in, it might be comfortable, it could be painful, but some people just stay right here and they never step across that threshold. But when you cross that threshold, that's really where the story begins. Then you do that search, right? How many people have done POVs and POCs looking for solutions, right? A few people in here. You got to look for that solution, the holy grail, or you got to look for the lamp, or you have to look for the love interest. You have to cross that threshold and you go looking for what is missing in the world. When you find it, sometimes it's exactly what you're looking for, sometimes it's not. But it's still a part of the story to find what you're looking for. When you find it, sometimes you have to pay a price. When it comes to cybersecurity, it can be an expensive price, am I right? But sometimes when we pay a price, maybe it's time. Maybe it's an opportunity cost. Because if we do one thing, maybe we're not able to do another. But whenever someone's going through this story, there is a price to pay. Now we go to return, right? Maybe we found the solution. We found the thing that we need. Now we're going to bring it back to our reality. We're going to bring that device or that solution into our environment and change things for the better. And sometimes it works as intended, sometimes it doesn't, but nonetheless, we learn something about our world. Change. When we bring those things in, sometimes we change the world. But either way, whenever something happens in a story, that's the crux. That's usually the paramount of a story, is when something changes. Whenever you see a story about a person who is seemingly weak in the beginning of a movie, and then they go through all these trials and tribulations, and then they finally realize that the strength resides in them. That's when you start to get the goosebumps on your arms. Oh, whoa, something's different. Something's changed. That's the climax of that story. And then we go back in, and you can go around and around again, right? These are for different seasons, these are different shows, but all stories can have this. And so whenever you're thinking about storytelling, you can think about it from this context. Now, don't worry, we're going to get right back to it. But when you talk about storytelling, when Ron was talking about being on that webinar, and you just feel disconnected from it, it's just a bunch of information, it's because they didn't make you a part of the story. Whenever you become part of the story, it's much more interesting, right? Whenever you feel like the director or the author or whoever is telling that story brings you into it, and whether it's directly or indirectly, maybe they're telling a story that just resonates with you. Maybe it's a story of triumph. Maybe it's a story of sadness. But it can relate to something that we've been in as human beings. Now, I want to tell you a little bit of a story that has been a part of my life, and I rarely even tell this story to anyone. I was in the United States Marine Corps, and I got to do some really, really cool things. And I had another opportunity to do something really cool overseas. I was in intelligence, and I got to do a particular type of intelligence that was relatively new. And when we got in country, one of the leaders said, hey, I want all the folks to do this particular type of intelligence in one base. So I went from one base to the other. And we affectionately referred to this guy as Dr. No. Has anyone known a Dr. No? This is the person that always says no first, and you usually have to talk them into it. Dr. No's are tough, especially for creative people, because all we want to do is figure out how we can do things. How can we make something new, innovative, different, upgraded? But sometimes you deal with Dr. No's, and Dr. No's have their place. because Dr. No's can bring you back to reality. Maybe something isn't feasible. Maybe there's something you didn't think about. But this guy was Dr. No all day, every day. I found out I had the opportunity of a lifetime to do something really cool for a mission, and I can't really explain exactly what it was. All I knew is that I wanted to do this because I knew that in my heart of hearts, I knew that this particular mission was going to be one of the crowning glories of not only my military career, but maybe even my life. So I thought to myself, I'm like, all right, how do I talk this person who usually says no into doing something that I really want to do? Maybe I could scare them. Maybe I could say, oh, if you don't let me do this, you'll get fired, right? That works. Seems to work for a lot of marketing departments in cybersecurity these days, right? But I was like, oh, maybe that's not it. Maybe that's not it. Maybe I could tell them how much it means to me. I could say, okay, oh, this will mean so much to me. If you let me do this, it's so important. Me. That's how a lot of stories are told. Very self-centered, like thinking about me, the context of me and the story. This is what happens sometimes when we are giving presentations. When we're giving presentations and it's overly technical and we're not thinking about the audience, it's because we're just thinking about ourselves. We might understand it. It might be exciting to us, but is it exciting to the audience? Is it going to make the audience or that listener or that viewer take an action or make a decision? Probably not. So then I realized there is one way that I can frame this to make it very, very easy for him to say yes. I am a huge nerd when it comes to neuroscience, especially social neuroscience, someone who's obsessed with storytelling. And there are four main interactions that we have. One is a selfish interaction, like what I was just talking about, where, oh, it's all about me. Then it's altruistic. Altruistic is where I'm giving to someone, and I don't get a lot in return aside from satisfaction that I did something noble, but it might be a cost of money, time, whatever it is. There's spiteful, which I hope no one dips in the spiteful, which means it's going to cost you and it's going to cost me. So I'm going to take you down with me. Whatever happens, we're both burning to the ground. But then there's mutual. When you think about mutual, that means that you're going to get something and I'm going to get something. So whenever you're thinking about going into that room and you're giving that presentation to get that money for your particular security control, whenever you're stepping into the room to ask for ed count, whenever you're stepping into the room to start that new program, whether it's threat intelligence, threat hunting, maybe it's purple teaming, maybe you're trying to bring someone in for a red team, think about it from a mutual standpoint. How do I put this in perspective that's going to help them as much as it helps me? And so that's what I did. I remember I walked onto the watch floor, walked up to him, I was a little nervous, and honestly I could tell that people were watching me because they knew that I was going to ask to go on this mission, and they thought that he was going to say no. So I said, hey, we have this opportunity, right? You pulled this entire center of excellence, you put all of these analysts together. I have an opportunity to do something that's pretty freaking cool. And if we do this and we pull it off, this is going to make you, this is going to make the center of excellence, and this is going to make me look really good. And I remember I paused and I looked at him and I felt like it was an eternity. We sat there, and I could tell everyone else was kind of waiting too, just to see what he says. And after what seemed like forever, he sat there and he looked and he said, let's do it. And so from there on, I went and I did this mission. It took about a month or so. The stuff that I did on that mission set the stage for everything that I did in cybersecurity. If I would have never told that story, and if I didn't tell it in the way that I did, it could have changed everything. I might not even be sitting here today, but that is just to convey the power of being able to tell a story, being able to convey it to an audience member, and then put them in the story, make it immersive. So we're going to look at the thing one more time. Story circle. So right, the protagonist was both me and it was him. Right, something wasn't right. We needed to accomplish a mission. And so we decided to cross that threshold together into something that was different than the norm. We had to do the search, we had to do all this stuff, and then we brought everything back around. The mission was a success, and we changed reality based on this story.
Let's stay there for a second, because I think anyone can apply the story circle if you have a story that you want to tell or even a topic that you want to discuss. So if anybody wants to share, what's a presentation that you've given recently? What's a topic that you've discussed with someone that you want to convince? Who here has a topic or an idea that you've recently tried to convey to someone else? All right, right there. We got a mic coming to you.
I gave a presentation today about something that my company, Lockheed Martin, developed and published in 2011, which is the Lockheed Martin Cyber Kill Chain.
Mm-hmm.
And I explained to a mixed audience how it works, how it begins, how an attack can progress from simple open source reconnaissance to action upon objectives that could include destruction or exfiltration of sensitive information or disruption of operations. It resonated well with the audience because we found a simple way to explain it and make it clear.
Great. So it resonated with the audience because you found a simple way to make it clear. And you found a way to make it clear because the audience likely needed something. They needed information. It might have been a technique to stop attacks. They're getting bombarded with attacks. You know that a lot of organizations, and while we're all here, is to find ways to either express to others how to stop attacks or learn how to stop attacks. Silicon Valley ISSA is very valuable for that reason. What the need is, something isn't right. Maybe there's a specific type of attack that you can really apply as a use case. For a use case, it could be we want to stop or restrict cloud misconfiguration, and we're going to use the kill chain as a methodology. Now, when you're trying to talk about something like the kill chain, you're going to need to cross a threshold. You're going to need to find something to, you're going to need to find a threshold to cross. For this, it could be we need a solution. We need to implement a solution or build a solution. How do you do that? You have to do a lot of research, a lot of homework. You might have to talk to this gentleman here, and he could explain to you how to do it. But the beauty with the search part of this story circle is there's a lot of scenic detail in this phase. So one of the pieces that Chris was mentioning was he had an opportunity of a lifetime. He kind of walked you through the situation of knowing this Dr. No. He's always saying no. You know that this guy is going to say no because we've all spoken to him. So it's almost familiar. You could almost teleport yourself and imagine this Dr. No. Then Chris was talking to Dr. No and saying, hey, we have the opportunity of a lifetime. Pause. Looked at Dr. No, and that builds suspense. And builds suspense when he's telling you the story. But just imagine when Chris was speaking to Dr. No, presented his idea, and then gave a pause and allowed him to digest that message. Maybe Dr. No was searching and trying to find, does Chris know exactly what he's about to do? Is this going to make me look really good? And Chris talked about taking and paying the price. We recently did an episode on paying the piper. I feel like there's a lot of times in cybersecurity, and even when telling a story about cybersecurity, we have to pay the piper. Maybe it's through time. You're talking about if you want to save analyst actions, how do you do that? You have to implement a solution, find a new process, and that takes an investment. What is that? What is the story behind that investment? You know, going into that and articulating that to your audience makes the story real, so they're not mad at you later on, especially if you're a vendor or a solutions architect, for example. But for Chris, he said, hey, we could change our lives. We could change the way that we do intelligence and returning it home. So Chris, it sounded like when you told Dr. No that story, there was an opportunity for you guys to make an impact. But when you make an impact a lot of times, everything changes, but you're still back at square one. I speak to a lot of organizations and people about attack surface management, for instance. When you're doing something like attack surface management or even threat intelligence, you're going through a set of actions to fulfill an outcome, and then what do? You do it over and over and over again. And just like a story, I mean, that's what we do in cybersecurity. You can take those, you could take that idea and those topics and apply it to story or apply it to your work in cybersecurity. One thing that I think everyone can do more of, and it took me a very long time to realize this, is identify your audience. Before you go into a presentation, how often do you do research on who you're speaking to? Lots of hands, very impressive. For me, early in my career, I was so caught up in the bits and bytes of technology to where I would just splurt out technology details, very esoteric information to the audience, hoping that I could explain them what I know. But sometimes your audience doesn't necessarily care. They want to know, what is the impact? What does this have to do with me? So let's go to the next slide. And there's some tips and strategies from a high level that I would encourage everyone to take when identifying your audience before going into that presentation, before trying to tell a story. The first one is know who you're speaking to. What type of audience do you have? An example of this is an internal audience. Maybe this is your team, your stakeholders. Understanding, what do they know? Do your stakeholders know about the topic or idea that you're about to present on? And if it's an external audience, like a customer or a prospect, again, what do they know? Do they know that I'm about to speak to them about my solution? I've been in many calls where team members don't even know why they're there. They were just invited, they clicked on the link, and now they're there, voila. And they're looking at me, not knowing what they want out of me. Setting the stage, especially if you have any inkling about that audience member, you could set the stage right in the beginning and kind of re-highlight why you're there. I think a lot of times we're so eager to get into a meeting. Maybe we only have 30 minutes or 1 hour for a conversation or a presentation, and you just want to jump right into it. First, you got to understand the audience. All right. You know who the audience is. You're speaking to an internal group, an external group, whoever it may be. There are some questions that you have to know. The first question is, what does your audience know about you? Before everyone came here, did you all know about Hacker Valley? All right. Maybe like a quarter.
In the back that said they knew who we were.
Someone far in the back. So Chris and I kind of had an inkling, hey, there might not be a lot of people that know about Hacker Valley. Maybe we should drop a video in the beginning to kind of give you a little bit of a taste as to what kind of events we do, what kind of work we're in, just so we set the stage. You have kind of an idea as to what you're getting into. We knew we were going to be talking about storytelling, but it's also nice for your audience to know you as a person, because there's ways to build that connection human to human by setting that stage. The second question is, what does your audience know about the topic? From the first 5 minutes of being here, we knew that a lot of you all have already employed some storytelling tactics, because there was a lot of movie references. Hey, I like this movie because I really like the fact that someone was doing push-ups because of the Rocky movie. I love doing push-ups, and Rocky always gets me amped. And another question that I think is really, really important is, what does the audience need from you and from your idea? If you know what the audience needs from you and your idea, then it's just easier to say. For us, we're talking about storytelling. I'm trying to articulate and put this information into your head on the subject of story. I know that you're here for it, so I feel a lot more comfortable speaking about it. Who here has been on a call or a presentation where you're speaking and you're getting a blank stare? No one is really identifying with what you're putting out. Some hands went up. If you set the stage in the very beginning, one of the techniques that a lot of people do and that I've been recommended quite a bit is tell them 3 times. Tell them in the very beginning, what are you going to be speaking about? What are they going to walk away with? In the middle, what are you going to be speaking about? What are they going to walk away with? And at the very end, you summarize it again, what you spoke about and what they should take away. This is very effective for giving that message to the external party. All right, emotions, pre and post story. One thing that I've run into, and I'm not going to ask anyone to raise their hands for this part because I know everyone has run into this, but not coming into a meeting or presentation aware of what emotion other people are going to have. In cybersecurity, a lot of the times we feel guarded, especially if it's a vendor speaking to us, because a vendor wants to sell something. We already know that. So a lot of times when I am being told a story about a product, I'm immediately guarded. Now that is very useful information because what is the other person's goal? It's to make me feel at ease. It's to make me feel understood, to make me feel heard. Now, if you put yourself in that position where you ask yourself, what emotion is the audience going to have before I speak to them? You're now able to control your attitude. Maybe you need to act more excited because it's the end of the day, everybody's trying to get home. There is an opportunity there. Use vocal intonation or use alcohol, very effective as well. And then also, what emotion do you want the audience to have when they go home? Do you want them to feel confident, comfortable? If I'm a vendor, I want people to buy. If I am a cybersecurity practitioner doing corporate security, speaking to my stakeholders, I want them to have buy-in on my ideas. And there's an emotion behind that buy-in. Maybe it's confident, maybe it's eager. You want to be able to add these elements into your story to invoke an emotion, and that's all what story is about.
So what is your story about? We are going to do a little bit of crowd participation here. We are going to go through someone's story, or we're going to go through a couple of different stories. But before we do that, I want to give you all a little bit of time to think about your story, think about how are you going to convey the story to me, and then we're going to workshop your story together. Keep in mind that this is recorded. Also, there are people watching at home, so I wouldn't give out any particular details about your organization, but definitely let's workshop a story here together, and I think that'll be pretty fun. So let's talk a little bit about the types of stories, right? There's types of stories when it comes to conveying new information. If you're bringing something to someone for the first time, it might be a little shocking, or it could be a little scary. We were talking about in the beginning that a lot of times marketing teams, they tend to use FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Is that really the best way to tell that new information? Probably not. But sometimes we're telling stories just to update folks on what's going on in our world, in our programs. We gotta convey that, hey, you know, this program is going okay, but it could be better because I need more resources. Or this is where I'm stuck, I need help, right? Sometimes when we tell stories, we need someone to take an action or make a decision that'll help support us. But sometimes we need to tell stories just to convey who we are. We were in a situation a little while ago where we had to convey exactly what it is that we do for cybersecurity, or what do we do for companies, because they said, oh, wow, all you do is you tell stories all day. But sometimes that's what's important. Sometimes all it takes is for you to sit everyone down and tell them the story about you and why it is that you do the things that you do. I don't need to explain myself to anybody. Sure, you could take that approach. But if you really want to bring someone into your story and you want someone to be a champion for you or to be an ally, sometimes you have to tell your own story too. So with that, let's talk a little bit about someone else's story. Who's got a story that they need to tell? and they want help workshopping that story to tell whoever that stakeholder, audience, listener, viewer, who's going to be brave enough to do it.
So I don't want to be greedy, because people know here that I can tell a story and get out there. Maybe I can definitely get some tips from you guys. So I'm going to first encourage people, come on, don't be shy. Someone here's got to have a story. I want to be number 2 on the story list. Number one, here comes a mic.
We got number 1.
Thanks. I've been having trouble with the product that I built. Basically, just like a phone with a backable display screen. But kind of like the whole, I really like the story that I'm trying to convey is like, hey, I was struggling when I used to play basketball, soccer in high school. I struggled to run playbooks. So then I thought like, well, I was like, why can't we have this like AI trainer that uses AI to kind of put it more immersive? So yeah, just trying to put that storyline together, tie it to how AI kind of have projected on a little display screen.
All right, let's break that down. So let's say, I'm sure you could have a plethora of different audience folks, different demographics that you would convey the story to. Let's take one demographic, one particular person that you would convey the story to. Who are you speaking to?
Athletes.
All right, let's say you're speaking to athletes. So tell me a story about when you were playing a sport and you wish you could have that. Like tell the story of like what would happen if you didn't have this particular device, and then what does it look like after?
Okay, so yeah, basically I underestimated how tactical football could be. I just watched it. I thought it was fun. I consider myself athletic enough to play. I certainly, made the team. But once we got down to the room with the coaches, and they're explaining these formations, right? I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Run there, catch the ball, simple. Once I was on the field, and the coach is like, hey, run this play, left wing, H right. I was like, what? I just couldn't remember the play. I had no idea. I was like, in soccer, you just kind of take the ball and just, score the goal. And it's not as tactical as football was. So I just started messing up the plays, and the players were yelling at me, the coaches were yelling at me. And I was like, man, this sucks. Like, why is it so hard? It shouldn't be rocket science, but in the moment it was to me. So like I said, while I was on the bench just thinking, I was like, man, it'd be cool if we could have this kind of like AI trainer that helps us get these little mental repetitions in. So while I'm on the sideline or, walking to class or, on the bus or whatever, doing things around the house, I can just like get these plays out and just like practice them.
So let's go ahead and workshop that. So I'm going to pretend that you are my audience, right? You're that athlete, and you have no idea what this contraption is, and I'm trying to convey to you why you might need this contraption. So have you ever forgotten someone's name, someone you know really close, like a relative or your best friend even? And you're like, oh, I just can't think of their name right now. Has that ever happened to you?
All the time.
All the time. Is a name more complex than a play? Is someone's name more complex than an entire play for a football team?
No, I don't think so.
Not even close. But what if I told you that when you step out onto that field, instead of standing there, hearing what the play is, and not being able to figure out what this play is even supposed to do, that you had a device that you could bring to the front of your face to remind you what that play is, and maybe even give other details that might be important for you for the game? Would you find that valuable?
Definitely.
Exactly, right? You put them into the story. You show them, hey, this is what the normal looks like, but with this contraption, this is what the new normal can look like. Make sense?
Awesome. Thank you so much. You did like a better job than I ever did.
No. It just takes practice, right? Storytelling takes practice. I mean, I didn't just like wake up one day and like, hey, I'm gonna start telling stories. I really put the reps in, practice, made a lot of mistakes, made a lot of blunders, right? But the more you practice storytelling, even if it's small storytelling, to start with like, hey, I'm gonna tell this little short story about my life to someone new. Or maybe I'm going to tell a story to a stranger. Just practicing every time you get an option to tell a story, that's how you get better at telling stories.
I think there was also a lot of great nuggets that you had in your personal story about forgetting plays. You had this problem where you're like, I can remember the plays before the play happens, before I go out on the field. The pressure of the field gets to you. Anxiety, the lights, and then you forget all of a sudden, and your team is relying on you to execute the play, but you can't. What do? You use my headset, because the headset can help you with a few things. It sounded like there was brain waves involved. There's a heads-up display. Sounds amazing, and I think talking about that problem like you just did was excellent. And then talking about what does that new world look like? If you were to use this headset, what experience is the quarterback or whoever is executing that play going to have? So how would you describe that? Like, what would be the new normal if you were to use the headset?
Well, I think for athletes and everybody else in general, would basically be like playbook on the go. Whether it's playbooks or television or whatever, just things on the go. I think like the problem with cell phones now is that we're always like looking down, and people always say, hey, but isn't that the same thing as like virtual reality, what you do? I say, well, not exactly, because virtual reality is like, you have to be sitting down in a closed environment. You can't like, run outside of the VR headset,
right.
Crash into something, right? So like, no, the augmented reality, is different, because you actually take it on the go. So while you're, walking to the car, or if you're like a professional, you're at work and you just want to catch your kid's soccer game or something, there's just always that ease to just pull it up.
Yeah, I think if you also included maybe a little bit of an element about what happens or what happened after the first time that you dreamt of this technology, or the first time that you used it, if you have a prototype, and what experience that provided. Maybe it provided an opportunity when you were practicing, you threw a Hail Mary to a team member, or even there was a lot of plays going on and there was a new play in the playbook that you never seen before, but you were able to, on the fly, understand that play and without disrupting your team.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
I think you guys just totally sold the product.
I want one.
We get a cut. We get a cut.
I'm just going to go out and raise like $2 million in funding.
There you go.
Take you guys out to dinner.
That sounds good. We'll take it. Who else? Let's workshop another one.
Can we put that slide?
The story circle?
Framework.
The story circle?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I come from technical program delivery, portfolio delivery background, and I worked in a large health insurance company. We had a big strategic project which we delivered, but I think 2 weeks after it was in production, there was a security incident that popped up. And kind of that, I was investigating. I went to the project manager, the delivery leaders who worked on that, and they said that they had no idea. They could not explain to me what that problem was. They said, let's get the technical architect in. So that technical architect was called. And then I asked the team, how come we ship, this vulnerable product? And they said, it's not our job. It is like security professionals' job to make sure that we are not shipping that. So kind of that made me think that we get security professionals to review our artifacts, but they are not there. I mean, there are so few security professionals, and they can't be just looking at everything. It's the delivery team that has to know how to build security in, bake security. So that was the problem. There wasn't something right, because the delivery team always thought it's not their job, it's the security professional's job. That wasn't right. So I thought, what can I do? I spoke to various delivery team members, and I always, I got the answer that it's very complex, that it's very intimidating. So that's how myself, so I come from a project delivery background. I spoke to a person who is a CISSP security into sales. So they said, we kind of talked to each other, why not we make it really simple? Why not we make these complex easy to understand? We illustrate all these concepts so that it becomes easy for people who are on the other side of security, business leaders, to understand. So we kind of did a lot of research. So we did the search thing, then finding information on that, then also paying the price, which is opportunity cost of not working and just working on the book. So we both worked on the book. We definitely paid the price, but eventually now bringing it home, yeah, feeling good that we've been able to come with the product. Now I hope it will change, and we are trying to reach out to business leaders to explain it to them that they really need to know the basics. At least they should know if they are approving a budget for a security tool, they should know where that security tool will be in the entire network. So very high level knowledge. So yeah, that's the story I'm trying to tell, and anything I can do to make it better to convince the business leaders about what awareness or cyber savviness they need to have.
Yeah. Have you ever heard, and I'm probably going to butcher the saying, but an ounce of prevention is worth its weight in a pound of response, right? Sometimes it's just better to be on the front end of a situation rather than trying to go back when something bad happens. And then this happens a lot in security. When we're talking about defense in depth, we're talking about bringing in solutions, we're talking about secure coding. If you would have had someone on the front end from a cybersecurity perspective, right? We talk about shifting left. If we brought someone in, one person, and all they did was sit there as we're trying to bring this project together and say, hey, consider this from a cybersecurity perspective. Instead of having just one person, when we push this thing into production and we have all these holes that we need to fix, now it's all hands on deck, because we might have just pushed a vulnerable project and now we have to spin up an incident response, we have to bring in lawyers, we have to have communication. So sometimes, I know that almost sounds like fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but sometimes you have to put the reality of, like, if we would have just put a little bit of effort on the front end, we would have saved a lot of time, we would have saved a lot of money, and we would be making the product better as we speak.
It sounds like there's also a lot of challenges, like you have leaders, there's not a single group that you're telling this to. It sounds like it's a organizational kind of project that you're working on. Is that right?
Yeah, right.
And one thing that I think could be an interesting area to explore is dissecting it one piece at a time. Trying to encapsulate all of the needs and all of the goals into a single pitch or a single story could be a little overwhelming for the audience. But there could be an opportunity to do the priorities one by one, going through like a timeline. Hey, we started here, and this is why we are taking this approach. We had to call the security architect. Here's what he found, or here's what she found. They found this, but hold on. This is also what we had to do to address this with the security architect. And then going through, and then if there is another component to the project, then going through the story circle again, and not trying to lump it all in one.
That's right, good point. Then that can become overwhelming for them. Right, step by step. Thank you.
Oh, of course, thanks for standing up.
Yes.
Now, what we're going to do is, if anybody wants us to kind of workshop stories, we'll definitely stay on after and go over to the side and talk about it. But right now, we want to just open it up for questions. Anything you want to ask about storytelling, creativity, figuring out who your audience is, we're just going to open it up to everybody. So just raise your hand and somebody will bring you a mic.
I got a mic already, so I'm going to jump in. So one thing I heard in both of these is kind of trying to take a maybe complex technical thing and try to make it clear to an audience. Do you guys have kind of advice on that? Because I think that's something that like everyone in the room here could probably use. Thank you.
Taking technical advice and
taking something really complex and trying to communicate that clearly.
Making a complex thing understandable, something that people can comprehend. I think this is where it goes back to almost identifying your audience. What do they know about this technical concept? If they don't know anything about the concept, maybe we're talking about, let's say DNS, for example. Do they know about how the internet works as a whole? Like, do they know how the DNS process works resolving a domain name to an IP address. If they don't know that, all right, we need to take a step back and talk about, hey, there's this system that we use to browse the web pages, and maybe avoid going into some of the esoteric information about like, hey, this is going to resolve to an IP address, and I'm going to route data from point A to point B using these IP addresses that were resolved. But I think abstraction is a great way to go about it. There's ways that you can take one concept that's a topic of a big. There's a way that you can. It's almost like a better way that I could say it is encapsulation. We look at the OSI model as a layer, as a opportunity for encapsulation. There's data, then there's packets, then there's frames, but you want to encapsulate your topics. If you're talking about IP addresses or a technical concept, I would say taking a zoom out, depending on the audience. But if the audience can hang with you, then you're good to go. But I think it's a challenging thing to answer. But maybe if you had a specific example, I could get a little closer.
I can help them out. So I remember this is when I first really started writing for cybersecurity. It's around 2015 sometime, and I was writing for the Fed Bar Association. I was writing an article, and they said, hey, we want an article on ransomware. And so I was like, how do I convey ransomware to a bunch of lawyers? And I love analogies and being able to tell a story from a parallel world in which they understand something, and then compare that to something that's a little bit more technical, I think is a really easy way to convey a complex concept. So in the article I said, I want you to imagine for a moment, you come home from a hard day of work, right? You went through traffic, you finally make it home. And when you get to your door, you put your key in, and the key doesn't work. You're like, what the heck, my key worked this morning? But you look at your door, and you realize that there was a note on it. And it says, if you want access to your house, you're going to have to pay us 10 Bitcoin in order to get access to your house. People can understand that because they can conceptualize a house. They can say, okay, so this is my house, but I no longer have access to it. And now that there's someone that's holding my house ransom, and I have to pay in order to get access to it again. Now they understand it. Oh yeah, I understand ransomware. So sometimes leveraging metaphors, leveraging analogies, trying to get as really tactile and specific as possible, and what we were talking about before was the lowest common denominator, right? What might they understand in that world that you can relate to that particular concept? Does that help?
It definitely does, and I'm going to pass the mic back, but just before, let me see if I can repeat back, right? That's one of those things we should do, yeah. Right? So I'm hearing know your audience as best you can, and then meet them where they are with analogies and stories that are going to get across your technical concept or whatever it is.
Nailed it.
Boom.
So I'm not really sure if this question, maybe I don't know my audience, okay? But I wanted to ask you about how you get past blocks, you know, like mental blocks when you try to talk about difficult experiences, right? It could be technical, you know, maybe your company got hacked and the CEO got fired, you know, because of some mistake that an engineer did, or maybe it's something else, right? About a painful experience in your life, right, which is not technical. So how do you get past, you know, those kind of blocks when you want to talk, tell a story about it?
Yeah, there's a couple blocks that you can work through. One might be a block of you building up the audience in your head too much. Like, oh, I need to razzle them and dazzle them. I need to come out of the gate and be super funny or super engaging. Sometimes if you build that up in your head, that's going to create a mental block. Imagine if it was just you and I sitting on a park bench having a conversation. How would you tell me that story? But sometimes what we do is we think that when we're being creative, we want a completely green field. We want that white sheet of paper. Oh, you can create whatever you want to create. True creativity really comes into play when you have parameters. Maybe it's a deadline. Maybe it's a specific topic that you're wanting to talk about. Giving yourself those parameters, that's when creativity jumps in. If I say, hey, name 10 things, it might take you a minute. But if I said, hey, name 10 different types of solutions in cybersecurity, it'd come much more rapidly than if I just gave you like an open space. So if you're getting locked, sometimes you need to take time off of that subject. Have you ever been working on something, trying to figure it out, and I just can't figure out what I want to put on paper, or I don't know what I want to talk about, don't know what I want to create, and then you hop in the shower, and all of a sudden, eureka, I got it, I know exactly, because your brain just went into default mode. So I would look at it from 3 different perspectives. Is it the audience that's keeping you from creating? Is it not having enough limitations to really focus your energy? Or are you working too hard to come up with a solution? And sometimes all you have to do is take that walk, all you have to do is take that shower, and then the ideas will come.
I would say also phone a friend. Just like the last question, I was trying really hard, like Chris was describing, to answer the question. Phone a friend. Hey, Chris, how would you describe answering a complicated topic and distilling it down? Asking questions is a great way. Phoning a friend is a great way. Anything helps, especially when you ask.
Well, fantastic. Yeah, we'll definitely answer more questions. I think we're out of time. 7:04. I definitely want to be cognizant of everybody at home. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks everybody for being here. We're going to pass it back to Mike and crew, but we'll definitely be hanging out after this to chat with you all.